So it's a really interesting part of our historical context of how yoga became something even known in the West. So basically this is, a look at some of the ritual and practice along with herbs, both in ancient and modern times, associated with traditional Ayurvedic practices and Vedic and even pre-Vedic practice. If you don't know, the Vedas are said to be the oldest text in the world. Some claim them to be 30,000 years old. Of course, it's an oral tradition, so it was chanted for a very long time. Out of that, there are 4 Vedas, and each of those deals with a particular aspect of society at the time. I've done one class, and this is kind of a continuation of what I call the Yoga of Plants, which I have available on my website at returntonature.us. And there I discuss more along the lines of how to take rasa, which is the flavor profile in Ayurveda, of which there are 6, and turn that into how do we interpret the flavor of a plant, whether it be wild or cultivated, common medicinal, or a plant we're not familiar with in the wild, and take a nibble test or consume that flavor, get the understanding of the flavor profile and how that translates into the organ systems, which organ that will, herb will affect, as well as the different tissue states that it will affect. So that's available online for anybody to check out at any time. Really insightful that basically your tongue is the sensor for the ability to perceive medicinal aspects, and this is really where you get a sort of archaic shamanism versus a top-down intellectual herbalism. So the original teachers of herbalism or practitioners of herbalism, whether you go to South America and you look at the indigenous tribes there, or whether you look at India and look at the indigenous tribes there, they all had a methodology which was based on plant sense meditations, the ability to taste a plant and work with it and go into a meditation and really sense and feel and perceive the plant itself. Of course, the Greeks learned a lot from this as well. We have this very read a book, look into the book and tell the plant what it's good for methodology. We really have a lot of capacity within our senses that we're not tapping into or accessing. So, of course, that's what I teach a lot at individual classes each weekend, which you're all welcome to come. With that said, I wanted to just break down a little bit about Western herbalism and kind of the flaws that we have in our herbal tradition. So in Western herbalism, what we very much have is a sort of perspective of, well, what is this herb good for? What is that herb good for? And I have this issue, which herb is best for that? I have that issue, which herb is best for that? This really comes from basically what I'd call an allopathic training, meaning that when we have a model of separation and isolation of chemistry, then we think that there is an isolated ingredient within a plant which is the most effective and therefore is the one we want. Whenever we do that, we completely disregard that the plant's evolution, its own biological trajectory as its own organism, was valid. So now we have a plant preserving these aspects, just like we have the human body preserving certain things like the pancreas or the appendix, and we get this model of understanding that there is one thing in that organism that is the most superior. And this creates a certain chain reaction. When you look at plants, the chain reaction that's occurred is that we have lost what's called the synergistic effect of the herb. So the most effective part of turmeric is said to be curcumin. So you might have seen there's all these studies on curcumin and all these things. Of course, a plant cannot be patented, but what can be patented if I, as a chemical company, extract and concentrate a certain alkaloid or chemical within it, then I can actually patent that formula. So a lot of what this kind of standardization is doing is allowing corporations to patent things that are natural. We have to remember that within each plant, there are over 10,000 chemicals, right? It's not just 1 or 2 or 3. So what we actually have to return to, and this is kind of part of the model that we'll work with, is the idea that if biology didn't want it there, if a plant didn't need a certain chemical or aspect to itself or aspect to its body, it would have already evolved beyond it. Food actually turns into dhatus and nourishes different dhatus. So the food goes into your system, and the first thing it nourishes is actually called rasa dhatu, which is plasma, your blood plasma. From there, it goes into your blood, rakta dhatu. It goes into your muscles, mamsa. It goes into your fat. Then it goes into your bone. It goes into your bone marrow. And then it builds into what's called shukra or artava, which is literally semen or vaginal fluid, reproductive tissue. So when you eat, there's actually this systematic phasing from tissue states to tissue states to tissue states to tissue states, and it drives the cells, the literal cells of the food as it's broken down by your gut and sent into your bloodstream, actually begins to nourish those tissue states, otherwise known as dhatus. So when you have a mantra like Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, the point of that is to really slow down to bombard your mind with that alone, so that you train your mind to not vary. Again, yogesh chitta vritti nirodha. So when you're not varying your mind and your thoughts, we know what a racing mind feels like. So we bombard it with a mantra, and that starts to really refine our focus. So that is basically the whole training of yoga. I'm also doing 2 mentorships in 2017, including an online version. So if anybody's interested to study together, you can check more of that on my website at returntonature.us. I'm also doing the 4 Seasons Camping mentorship, where students will come for 4 weekends next year, and we'll just immerse ourselves in foraging, herbalism, fire making, camping, water purification, primitive skills, all kinds of practices like that. And of course, most of you know, I'm currently fundraising on GoFundMe at Return to Nature for a van, so that I can go on the road and teach foraging and herbalism full-time by next year. So anyone, feel free, if you're listening in, please consider making any donation. Just $11 by many people goes a long way. So that will really help me to take these teachings to the next step. Really appreciate you all for joining us. Sending lots of love and blessings. Please continue to explore these concepts and really break the code on this. It's very important for all of us. So thank you all for joining. Many blessings.